Welcome to virtualsheetmusic.com and livingpianist.com. I'm Robert Estrin with a really interesting show. What is the difference between Mozart and Beethoven? This is a broad subject. We could devote an entire semester or at least to this subject. But I'm going to touch on two facets that make them different. Well, first of all, Beethoven came after Mozart, so the development of his music was built upon the foundations laid by Mozart and composers before Mozart. Of course, the Sonata Allegro form was an important part of the whole classical period, which is an ABA or ABC form, where you have two themes in the exposition and a development section and a recapitulation of the first two themes. There's a video I have on what is a sonata form that you can reference for this. For this little demonstration, I'm going to pick two different sonatas. I'm going to pick the Mozart Sonata K330 in C major and the Beethoven Sonata Opus 14 number 2 in G major, a relatively early work of Beethoven. The things I'm going to talk about in the early works of Beethoven are even more extreme in later works. But I picked an earlier sonata of Beethoven to show you that their personalities are inherently different. It wasn't just the expansiveness of the forms and the development of the piano, which really entered into later sonatas of Beethoven. It really is the whole crux of his personality, the fiery personality, compared to the beautiful, sweet personality of Mozart. So first I'm going to play a little bit of the exposition, and notice the roundness of the phrasing in this Mozart Sonata in C, K330. There's a kind of perfection, a jewel-like perfection of the music of Mozart. Everything goes just where you want it to. Every note is placed so perfectly that if you changed any one note, it would sound off. That's the perfection of Mozart. Now, Beethoven is a little bit different. Beethoven's personality is one of surprises. So, for example, one of the techniques he utilizes in his music is to set yourself up where something's building and suddenly it gets soft. The subito piano technique, and you'll hear it at the beginning of the Opus 14 number 2 G major sonata. Listen how he builds up and then suddenly down to nothing. Very shocking. Something you wouldn't expect. So whereas Mozart, there's that jewel-like perfection where every note is placed so perfectly it makes you go, ah. Beethoven makes you think he's going to do that, and just when you're lulled into a sense of complacency, he shocks you and keeps you on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen next. Another facet, a fundamental difference between Mozart and Beethoven is how Beethoven developed the form. Now, in his later sonatas, his development sections are massive. Yet, even in the earlier sonatas, they go much further than they do in a Mozart development section. Once again, the development section comes after the exposition, which introduces the first two themes, and the whole exposition repeats. Then comes the development section. So listen to a beautiful development section in this same Mozart C major sonata. It's delightful when that recapitulation comes, isn't it? It feels like you're coming home after a long trip. Very beautiful writing, how he takes those first two themes from the exposition and develops them. But listen how Beethoven takes the themes and goes further with his development section. It's not necessarily longer in this case, which his later sonatas really did, but listen how he really tears it up in the development of the Opus 14 number 2 G major sonata. It's quite a bit of difference there. Yes, there is more development in the Beethoven development section than in the Mozart development section, but it's more than that. How he goes further out from the mood of the original character of the exposition section. And as texturally, rhythmically, they're faster notes, a whole lot of differences. So we can sum up today's lesson about Beethoven versus Mozart, both jewel composers, but Mozart, the beautiful thing about his music is the perfect balance, going exactly where you want it to, exactly where you expect it to, where any one note out of place would ruin the whole thing. It's just such a perfect architecture. Beethoven takes it one step further, setting you up for the expectation of a Mozart type of sonata, but surprising you with subito pianos and taking development sections to places you'd never expect them to go. I hope you've enjoyed this program, and we'll have more future programs exploring more about Beethoven and Mozart and other composers. Thanks so much for joining me here on livingpianist.com and virtualsheetmusic.com. I am Robert Estrin.